Well, let's try this again, shall we? Welcome back, Red Spotters. Another show here on the Red Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host today, Alexis J. Soto, joined by my very good friend, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it. We'll see how his behavior is like today. Mr. Peter Martinez is back with us today. Every day is an adventure. That is true. And part of what has spurred me saying let's try this again is today we're going to present to you a very belated installment of a series that quite unfortunately was put on hiatus months ago at this point, and that's really hard to believe. We're back with our Del Toro series. Guillermo Del Toro, the very decorated filmmaker. The first installment we talked about, perhaps some of his most well-known work, which includes Pan's Labyrinth, The Devil's Backbone, and Kronos. That's a really good introductory episode to talk about Del Toro, and of course we'll be doing that again here with episode 2. And the movies that we'll be discussing today are Blade 2, Hellboy 2, and Pacific Rim, the blockbusters of Del Toro's filmography. Now, here we are at last, and months after, having seen the movies that we were supposed to talk about, now we're back here, and we're talking about them, and I honestly... it's just surreal to me, we were supposed to have this particular series of episodes should have long been, I don't know, finished, and yet here we are. So
we are here.
That's
something.
Yeah, I think that's very much true. So I think we're gonna start with the first blockbuster, and that is Blade 2.
Blade Those. Directed by Alfonso Cuarón. Faster, sharper, deadlier. A rare mutation has occurred within the vampire community, the Reaper. A vampire so consumed with an insatiable bloodlust that they prey on vampires as well as humans, transforming victims who are unlucky enough to survive into Reapers themselves. Blade is asked by the Vampire Nation for his help in preventing a nightmare plague that would wipe out both humans and vampires. And then, of course, starring Wesley Snipes, Chris Christopherson, Ron Perlman, Norman Reedus. I think that started the, that's Norman Reedus' first film, I think.
That may have been his first, maybe noteworthy performance, but I do remember Norman Reedus actually was in an earlier Del Toro movie. If you remember, he had one scene in Mimic, which we'll discuss in the next Del Toro installment.
Oh, right, okay. Mm-hmm.
But this is where this
is billed as his first role, I
basically,
guess. Yeah. You've probably never even seen a Blade film before.
No.
So this is your one and only entry both into Blade and Blade. I don't know. How did you like it?
I loved this movie. In many cases, I just found myself oohing and awing at the 2000-ishness of the 2000s era that was practically dripping, oozing off of it. It took me back to an era of filmmaking that is quite unfortunately dead. I mean, for better and for worse, obviously we've evolved, and film always evolves with the times and everything. But this is very much the kind of movie in general, but then also in particular with this being a blockbuster and a comic book movie. These are the kind of movies that are extinct. We don't get anymore. And for a large variety of reasons, You have interesting characters. You have pretty, I would say, substantial character work here. It's more than just having likable people leading blockbusters. You have great storytelling that is immersed in the DNA of Del Toro. I didn't see Blade 1, but I know he didn't direct the first one, and I'm sure you could probably tell the differences. In particular, his obsession with vampires comes back in here, which may be some of the best creature work I've ever seen in one of these movies. It is, notwithstanding, of course, the ones we'll discuss, further along in this episode. Also, the tone of it reeks of the 2000s, which I am just fascinated with and couldn't get enough of. The action is stellar as well. I don't know what more I could say other than it was fantastic.
This is maybe Guillermo del Toro's only work for hire type film. Because I've heard him talk about it. He talks about how he wanted to make it specifically to prove that he can do big films. Because I think he just came off Mimic.
Right. Which we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But it wasn't great for him at all.
No.
So he just got off Mimic. And he'd been trying to get Hellboy made. And I think he had said Blade 2 was kind of a way to prove that he can make big blockbuster movies. I don't know if just to himself, but also to, financiers and the studio and stuff like that. And he talks about how he went to talk to Wesley Snipes, because Wesley Snipes was Blade. This is still the early 2000s, so Blade 1 might have been late 1990s.
It was late 90s.
Okay, so this is when movie stars were still it. They were it. They sold films. So Wesley Snipes was Blade. And I guess he went to talk to Wesley Snipes. And he basically told him, I don't know about any of this Blade stuff, but I can do the vampire stuff. I can sell the shit out of it on that. So you handle all the Blade stuff and I'll handle the vampires. And I guess, Wesley Snipes was just I don't do this, I don't do that, I don't do this. I don't do overhead shots. I only just different camera moves. I'm only here, and I like to be done by this time because I like to go home early. You just told Guillermo Del Toro, can you do that? He's like, yeah, I can do it. And he's like, all right, you're hired.
I've heard that story of him telling that before, and it's just hilarious because it also gives you a peek into also a little bit of an era that's kind of gone in the industry, because I'm not sure with today's hyper awareness of social media, and I don't mean this in a bad way, good way. I don't want to start the whole cancel culture thing, but canceling celebrities and everything. It's not that kind of prima donna-ish behavior with it being out there is no longer a luxury for these people. The way that is. Not that was the most, by any means, the most unreasonable behavior that was happening. It seems
pretty, it's obviously just I don't do this, I don't do that. But it's pretty mild when you consider a lot of other stories out there. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, and it is hilarious, too.
But no, you can tell because if you've seen the first Blade, the action is similar. Of the music, these... late 90s, early 2000s rock, as they're kicking and punching and stabbing vampires, the Blade one-liners, the leather, so much of it is just this already built into what Blade was from the first film, and then also of course the times. But what really changed from the first to the second was the vampire, the Reapers, as they call them, and of course it's just dripping Guillermo del Toro and his just his obsession with monsters, because they even have and I guess this is jumping right into it, but if these Reapers, so to speak, they even have an autopsy scene
Yeah.
And Guillermo Del Toro just sat there with a notepad, like, okay, well, how did these vampires work? And
Yeah.
he's just imagining, like, they have the tendrils, the mouth opens up, and then they have this that, latches on and makes the people fall asleep. They have a, super hard rib cage, and like he's just thinking about the anatomy, every little thing that goes into this vampire design.
Yeah, and unlike other directors, I won't mention which ones, that just select things just based on how it feels or how cool it is, but there is also specific thought put into the anatomy of the vampire, which also plays into the story and themes. How about that? That can be done, and he does it to great effect. I mean, that in and of itself is really accurate, because we're all talking about Del Toro primarily, and you do get, with all the movies that we've all seen with Del Toro, and we're covering all of his movies that he's directed in this series, you pick up on certain reoccurring themes. In particular, with this, I believe this is the second vampire movie that he's, the recurring, and the recurring elements with the monsters. Honestly,
Who's the real monster?
Right, and I think the most disgusting monster work we haven't discussed yet, we'll get to in the next episode. But yeah, like I honestly feel like half of what makes the movie just work, period, is the vampires in terms of their design. Then also, I mean, maybe just even that, because of how just I don't want to say they look like realistic, because I mean it's a fucking vampire, but when you're introduced to this vampire society, and I guess you have the Dark Lord of the vampire leaders, they're all, I don't know, you buy it with, I think, and with how much work is put into it. And I just know that if that kind of movie were made today, with Del Toro, of course, not involved, it would just be some kind of shitty CGI looking thing that would make no impact on the audience.
Well, remember, they have one vampire movie coming out with, what's his name?
There's a vampire movie coming out?
With the Joker, baby.
That? You mean the Morbius movie?
Yeah. And it's CGI. I think they showed, because it's Morbius, the living vampire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, you and I, in general, with comic book movies these days, are not very interested. Even less so when it comes from Sony, because they have a pretty awful track record with their comic book films. And last I heard, inside the studio, they're not happy with how that movie turned out. So,
I mean, Venom was a piece of shit and everyone loved it, so they shouldn't write it off so quickly.
Can you believe that? Oh God, I don't want to get distracted, but that is very much true. And that was, from what I heard, I mean, it just looked awful. I didn't even need to see it to know that it was awful.
Yeah. But no, like, there's so much personality, I would say.
Yes, there's life,
Ironically enough, yeah.
In the undead, yeah.
And there's just such little things that visually stand out to me. Like, there's a point where I think they, like, one of those Reaper vampires, they, like, stab it in the stomach, and it's on the side of a wall, and then it's like it crawls back up, and then because the sword is like, it like cuts, and like blood and guts come out as it crawls back up, all creepy like. Yeah, there's just little visual things with the film that always stood out, and plus the action is just that early 2000s cheese fun. I love it.
Yeah, that, and I don't know, like we said in our recent review of Wonder Woman 84, the thing that was least wrong with the movie was the attempt at cheese, was the attempt at camp. And that was very much an example of that movie didn't work at all, unfortunately, but the camp and the cheese did. However, here's an example with Blade 2 where it very much does. And quite frankly, I think it holds up quite well, especially when you compare. I mean, look, the 2000s era is a very interesting era in film. And too frequently, I feel it is very much chastised as an era not at all remarkable. And in fairness, it has produced a lot of noteworthy and high-profile examples of what not to do in all shapes and sizes in movies. But I think this is one of the ones where, I don't know, it's going to be a classic one of these days. I'm telling you right now. That I
also think it's like as tastes change, people are like, ugh. But then when nostalgia comes back around, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
You know, that happened with the 80s. I can see it's already happening with the 90s. Where it's like, you know what? This shit's pretty fucking cool.
It happens almost to anything. Like, remember, I think we've been doing, movie reviews and talking about all these different films for years now on this podcast. And we talk about how some of our favorite films and two of the most well-known movies in history, Empire Strikes Back and The Shining. Curiously enough, both films that came out in the same year, 1980, were met with very mixed, if not harsh reaction. And now they're classics and you can't argue otherwise. It's just...
Yeah. I think people would be surprised if they knew how many of the films they deem as classic were just kind of like ignored or even just criticized when they were first released. There's so many. But no, Blade 2. Yeah, there's not much to talk about with Blade 2. It's a very simple movie. It's a surface level movie, but It's meant to be one.
Yes, yeah. So it works like in that way.
It knows exactly what it is, and it delivers.
Yeah,
and I really love those kinds of films where you just throw it on, have fun. You can tell, Guillermo's just trying to like exercising his cinema chops.
Right.
He's like, all right, let's make a big movie. And you can see a lot of the designs that he carries through with him for the rest of his career. The vampire design is very much Guillermo, but also the design of the suits that the vampires wear to protect them from sunlight. Where it's like it's all black and then they have like the big goggle eyes.
Yeah.
They kind of like move in and out. Like that's some shit you could have seen in Hellboy. Like they're very distinctly Guillermo. And of course Wesley Snipes he is Blade.
The performances are great. I guess if we're going to comment on the story, yes, you're right. It's very straightforward, and not every movie needs to be, multi-layered or have a deeper meaning. Like there are movies like James Bond, Mission Impossible films that are very much working at one particular point and level, and that's great. There's no knock against that. Those movies are great in their own right, and they do it perhaps to the best degree. And this is an example of it. I will say one particular element in the story that did catch me off guard was Norman Reedus, double-crossing Blade.
Oh yeah, they blew up Norman Reedus.
Yeah, that was funny. I laughed because I had never seen Norman Reedus blow up like that. So that was fun.
No, that was a funny little twist. And also Ron Perlman was cool.
Yeah, he's cool in everything.
The asshole vampire.
Yeah. He's great in anything. Yeah. There's a lot of Ron Perlman in this episode, so we got a lot to get into.
Oh, a lot, yeah. A lot. Oh God, it's nothing but Ron Perlman. I just realized.
Yeah.
But you can never have too much Ron Perlman, as I have found.
Yeah.
He's great. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that covers it.
I think so too. Go watch Blade 2. It is so much fun. It honestly really is. A lot more fun than, oh boy, some of the movies that we've been getting lately, honestly. So, with that, Shall we get into Hellboy 1?
Yes. Directed by Guillermo Del Toro. 2004. From the dark side to our side. In the final days of World War II, the Nazis attempt to use black magic to aid their dying cause. The Allies raid the camp where the ceremony is taking place, but not before a demon, Hellboy, has already been conjured. Joining the Allied forces, Hellboy eventually grows to adulthood, serving the cause of good rather than evil. Okay. That's more of just the first 20 minutes than any...
That's more of an overview,
minutes.
Yeah. Some of these descriptions are not very... yeah.
I don't know who does these descriptions. Some of them are good, and then some of them saying absolutely nothing.
They're not really sufficient.
And then other ones, yeah. But yeah, Hellboy.
Real quick, this may be a side tangent. It's hilarious to me how many examples in films there are of the Nazis literally being demonic in every way, shape, or form, and yet we're still fighting them today.
Because people are stupid. They'll go, oh, they're not Nazis. They're such and such. They're this, they're that. Oh, you're the real Nazi because you're intolerant of Nazis. It's the Nazi paradox. Or no, the intolerance paradox. Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? You know what? I want to make America great again. When killing Nazis was not viewed as a negative. Hellboy, Ron Perlman, John Hurt, Selma Blair, Jeffrey Tambor, Rupert Evans, Doug Jones, and then, a bunch of other people.
Great cast. Great cast. Man. And honestly, look, I don't know, and I'm so happy that in many of these movies, especially with blockbusters, right? And especially with Del Toro's blockbusters, I'm so fortunate that I really kind of experienced them in 2020, where there was a vacuum of things to be happy about, first and foremost. There was also a vacuum of movies. And even the ones that we got weren't very good. In particular, also with blockbusters. And also with blockbusters in this era. Look, I'm 25. I'm, basically this big kid. My favorite kind of movies are still Star Wars, Marvel, superheroes, blockbusters. I love those kind of movies. They're the ones that, I love and can watch them over and over and over again. But it also has been no secret that in the last several years, I have kind of grown very critical and really exhausted with a lot of the lackluster content that's been coming out of that genre. And it's not exclusive to just, not to excuse them. It is very much Lucasfilm, Disney, Marvel, but it also is, some of the other studios when it comes to just general blockbusters. I have to, in the last 10 years, I'm sure there were like hundreds of blockbuster films that were just awful. And some of them were maybe okay, some of them were all right, but they're just, not anywhere near as exciting, not anywhere near as interesting, and not anywhere near as good as they would have if they were made in a different era, in a bygone era, like the 90s or the 2000s. At least it would have been fun or cheesy or interesting in some way. And they lacked all of that. And in particular with Hellboy, again, similar like with Blade 2. This was just a brush of fresh nostalgia to me. It brought me back to those years of the 2000s. But it wasn't just that, though. There was meticulous thematic character work and creature work, and it all kind of like, you have all of these different like parts of a stew that are just, mixing in this pot, and they all fit together really well. And you also have these charismatic actors that are really bringing these performances to life, to where Ron Perlman is in this, and Doug Jones are literally covered in like makeup and suits, and yet they feel like some of the most human characters maybe ever, especially in the last 2 decades. Honestly, I loved these movies so much that I bought them on 4K. So, you know,
these are great. These are a couple of my favorite blockbusters ever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really, really love them, and I really love the characters. I'm someone who loved this shit since I was young. I remember renting the DVD for Hellboy and watching the shit out of it like a million times because I loved it so goddamn much.
Wow.
I remember when the trailers played for Hellboy II. Man, what grade was I don't remember, but I remember like loving it must have been 2006 or something when it came out.
Well, 2008 was when it came out, Hellboy 2.
Okay, that makes sense. So junior high-ish.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved these films growing up. And then I did rewatch them because we were going to do this. And I just loved them even more.
Yeah.
With Hellboy 1 and Hellboy 2, not to get into Hellboy 2 too much, but you do notice something that I see a bit when it comes to directors, awesome directors that get like their first big, what do you call it?
Big budget movie?
Big budget movie, and then they get a sequel, and they're given a little bit more leeway in the sequel. Because the first film definitely feels a little bit more early 2000s, and then the second film feels a little bit more Del Toro.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 versus Volume 2.
Yeah.
Volume 1 is awesome, obviously, but I think you can tell with Volume 2, it's a lot more Gunn in there. A lot more James Gunn.
Thank you for plugging our recent Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 audio commentary. I sat down with David Francisco and we were just, gushing about that movie. So,
did you?
Yeah, absolutely. It is arguably the best Marvel movie. Arguably. I put that qualifier, not to start, side tangents, obviously, but I say that repeatedly.
I mean, I would agree. I place it number 1.
I said arguably. I didn't say I place it number 1. In fact, I made that stipulation quite clear several times. Go listen to it. The audio commentary. So it's great.
But yeah, you see that with the first Hellboy, and it's a little bit darker, not like character-wise or anything like that. Although the second one does have a little bit more humor, but just more like color-wise.
Right.
And, the second one is a little bit more mystical. The first one is more biblical, you can say, as far as what it pulls from.
And just to be clear, in case people are not picking up on this, it very much... I think that's a great comparison, Peter. The similarity is when you're comparing Gunn's Guardians movies 1 and 2, and then Del Toro's Hellboy movies 1 and 2. And I think in the examples of both, you have to understand that in particular to when they arrived on the scene, the source material, perhaps the full authenticity of the source material, perhaps was not ready for the audiences, and that that made it quite questionable in the eyes of the studios, which of course we have to recall that in the case of blockbusters, the very nature of them being big budget movies, they have the most oversight by, the studios, the studio chiefs, executives, all that kind of crap. And it very much, unfortunately, that's just the way the system is. They were whittled down to, get as much as they possibly could. Although that being said, while you can definitely tell that's exactly what happened, I don't think it made the film any less great. In either of those,
no.
To me, I love them. In the case of Hellboy 1 and Guardians 1. So
yeah. No, with Hellboy 1, for one, I think it's pretty obvious why everyone loves Ron Perlman as Hellboy.
Yeah. He's hilarious,
to
man.
me,
He's great.
He's great. He is Hellboy to me.
Yeah.
Um,
By the way, Netflix, get Hellboy 3 ready to go. Paramount, Netflix, or whatever. Get something going. Come on.
Anyone.
Come on.
I'll take a Disney Plus at this point. Someone, oh God, the pain of never getting Hellboy 3. Oh God, don't bring it up.
How can we not? We're talking about these movies. It is unforgivable, really, that tragedy.
It's genuinely unforgivable. But no, it's so great. And you can tell he has, when he talks about his love for monsters, this is it right here. You know, Hellboy is viewed to the world as a monster. And he is. You know, he is meant to usher in the destruction of the world, the apocalypse. He's the prince of darkness, so to speak. And it's basically about all of the character work between him and Liz and his father, like, works so well to me.
Yeah.
I love what's his name as his dad.
No, John Hurt, the great John Hurt is in here. John Hurt's one of those actors where he is great in everything he's in. I mean, just to list a couple of things that I recall, Alien, Snowpiercer. Of course, you have here with Hellboy. There was some other stuff. He was also in Doctor Who, by the way. He played the Doctor.
The War Doctor?
Yeah, the War Doctor. So, no, he's great. And unfortunately, we did lose him a few years ago, which was sad to hear.
Yeah. I always got him mixed up with another older actor, but I can't remember who. But anyway, John Hurt, he's awesome. And just, like, you know, spoilers. The plot is basically Rasputin, who worked with the Nazis to try to bring about...
Wasn't he also in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
Yes.
Okay, just
he
making
was.
sure. Yeah.
That was John Hurt.
Yeah.
Rasputin is working with, in the very beginning of the film, working with the Nazis to unleash these basically elder gods, Cthulhu-looking creatures who are destined to destroy the earth, and the one who's destined to bring about this is Hellboy himself. And Rasputin is basically like an occultist who worships these gods, and the whole film is basically that. Like, he's the bad guy and he's trying to bring about this. And then they even have it like an undead Nazi assassin guy.
He is the one I wanted to mention, because I felt like he was the one that I actually found more interesting, even though there was really, he doesn't say anything, he has no dialogue, but I found him not only to be threatening and menacing, but just cool, man. An undead fucking Nazi, like, that was almost kind of unstoppable, that, and intimidating as well. That was great character.
He's basically like a clock that he like his blood is sand, and he like twists the dial to keep going like a giant mechanical toy or something.
Yeah.
And then when they show him without his mask, and it's just
Yeah.
Yeah. But about halfway through the movie is when they, spoilers, kill John Hurt.
Yeah.
And like, that moment worked so well for me emotionally.
Yeah.
And rewatching it, I was surprised by that. And then, of course, the ultimate third act, when he's like, you know, your dad gave you a choice. You know, you don't, this isn't who you have to be. He taught you humanity. And that's kind of like the whole message of the film. You know, what makes a man a man? They say it both at the beginning and at the end of the film. It's simple and it's fun and it's light, but when it has to hit, it does hit.
It does.
Like, those moments, I think they hit me.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
And that's also, you know, true. Another one of these things I wanted to bring up is, you know, necessarily, I guess, lament the fact that there isn't as much cheese or camp in comic book movies these days. I do, but not as much as I lament the absence of heart and the absence of genuine emotional moments. I think for the most part, with exceptions, and very few exceptions, maybe fewer in Peter's case, but with few exceptions, most blockbusters these days have a just I guess they attempt to have genuine emotional moments, but in different ways that are often muted and almost non-existent, and to the point where it just kind of falls by the wayside. Whereas in these films, they commit to it and they land. I think the best example of, well, we just mentioned it, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which went for that heart and went for that emotion with these kind of movies.
You know, I think the word I would use is like tender.
There were tender moments.
There's not many tender moments. And I know we haven't talked about this yet, and I'm sure there will be another video in which we talk about this. But that's why I'm kind of getting into WandaVision, which, you know, just dropped, and I have a lot of more hope for the rest of the season.
Go watch WandaVision. Go watch it. No, I'm gonna tell you something right now. I probably love WandaVision more now than I did any movie last year.
Yeah, maybe.
And also another plug, David Francisco and I will be covering WandaVision every single week. We have our first installment yet to come, which would be, well, actually, I want to say by the time this is even up, it would already have, it'll be up on there when we talk about the first 2 episodes of WandaVision. But you're so right, because I think I was even in tears watching that again last night. It was like, because they commit, but they also sell you on, you know, to your point, tender moments. And that makes it, I don't know, actually
human.
Yes, it makes it human, but it also makes you feel something. It makes a romance, and these kind of movies make you feel something, which that's another one of those elements that have just completely fallen by the wayside. However, with Hellboy, you have Liz and you have, you know, Hellboy here, and that's another one of those examples where it works.
Yeah, I think at some point it feels like they became more of obligations, that like these are things you have to do to make a movie, or at the very least these kinds of movies. But I feel like, you know, talking about WandaVision, or even especially because we're talking about Hellboy, it doesn't feel like an obligation. It feels there's a real commitment to it. Like Guillermo Del Toro believes in, you know, this love between Hellboy and Liz, you know, between him and his father. There's a line, oh shoot, it might have been Hellboy 2 where it was Hellboy 1 where he says, like, I wish, you know, I could change this. And he talks about his face, you know, he points to his face. And I don't know, that just felt so raw.
Yeah.
And I think I saw Guillermo Del Toro talk about that, and he's like, he mentioned that moment. He's like, yeah, I feel like that too sometimes. And, you know, he jokes about being a bigger guy and stuff like that. But, you know, insecurities can come from that. And I think everyone can relate to that at some level.
Absolutely.
So, no, and just to sell it, you know, not just do it because it's like, well, you're supposed to do this, this, and this. But to fully commit, I think that's what the difference between a good movie and just a great one. And I love Hellboy. I think it's great. And then of course his designs, the frog sea creature things.
Yeah.
It's great. The fight in not the tunnel, but the subway.
Right.
Because there is some CG, but you also know there's a big puppet guy in a weird costume, and you have Hellboy there punching him, and you can tell they had lines where they dragged the body back and forth, and destructible walls, and maybe because it was made at like similar times, but it brings me back to something like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man's, where like they go through a window and. But you can tell that's all real in the set right there. Yeah.
Since you mentioned that scene, and it's indicative of a character trait that Mr. Hellboy has, which I'm sure appealed to you. And I wonder if perhaps that may have sparked a fascination on your part as a child watching this movie. But he likes cats. And in that sequence, I think he actually saves a box of kittens or something.
Yeah. I loved it. But that's the thing. Each of the characters, they just have they have distinct personalities.
Yes.
And it's like, if you can't give characters a lot, at the very least, give them distinct personalities. Make them fun watching them. Like Abe really doesn't get a lot to do.
Here. Yeah.
He's here, but he's fun. You know, he's visually, he's great. He's hyper intelligent. He eats raw eggs. It's a delicacy to him.
He reminds me, I know that it's Doug Jones doing, of course, in the soup, then also doing the voice work as well. But he kind of reminds me...
That's not true.
That's not true? Not
in the first film. In the first film, Niles does the voice.
Dude, okay, look, listen. I swear to God, I was just about to mention David Hyde Pierce, who plays Niles on Frasier, because that's what it reminded me of, was that character in general felt like, you know, David Hyde Pierce type of character that we get in Frasier, and then also A Bug's Life. Like, really?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
In the first film, he dubbed the voice, but in the second film, that was
Doug Jones.
That was Doug Jones, like, completely. Yeah.
I love David Hyde Pierce. How did I something about it reminded me about it. So there it was. I wonder why. Okay, well, let me tell you something. I did not pick up on a difference in the first movie or the second film of Abe's voice. It went over my head completely. I didn't think of it.
I didn't pick up on it until the rewatch, and I was like, that's him. Like, in my mind, I'm like, but I know it's Doug Jones. And then I looked it up, and I was like, oh wow, they had him dubbed. And again, that again feels like a what do you call it? Like, Guillermo Del Toro's got a little bit more power in the second one. Like, maybe a studio's like, hey, you gotta use this known voice, da 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 da. But then in the second, he's like, no, Doug is my guy. Like, he can do it. That seems kind of like maybe something that happened. I don't know. But I mean, again, you could barely notice.
I didn't at all. And I love the design of the creature as well. And I don't know if anyone's made much about how similar looking it looks to the creature in The Shape of Water.
I know. I don't think I told you at the time, because I knew you hadn't seen the Hellboy movies. But when the first trailer for The Shape of Water dropped, everyone thought it was an Abe Sapien spinoff. Because in the first trailer, you only see like the silhouette. It's like exactly the same. He loves classical music, because remember they had or sophisticated music,
right? And
then he was eating eggs. You remember?
Yeah.
So people were like, "Is this an Abe Sapien movie?" Everyone was saying that. And then I also love his name, Abe Sapien.
Yeah.
And then Liz is great too. She has sort of a dry humor to her that pops a little bit more in the second film. Their relationship, and again, there's humor, like him on the rooftop when he's watching Liz's date.
Yeah, that was funny too, because he's with the kid and he's just like, you're not supposed to. Not only you can't really show yourself to anybody, but you're showing yourself to this kid and having an interesting, maybe not age appropriate conversation as they're spying on date.
Yeah, no, that's
Jeffrey
great.
Tambor was hilarious when he was clashing with Hellboy.
Yeah, and again, they kick him up a notch in 2. He goes from what's his name? Like they did to that one character.
In what?
Star Wars.
Which one?
From The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi.
Poe Dameron?
No. Close. He's in the beginning of the film too. It's the bad guy.
Kylo Ren?
The other one.
Snoke.
Not Snoke.
Hux.
There's one more. Hux.
Oh my god.
We got there. But no, yeah, Hux was a little bit more serious in the first one. In the second one, he was a lot more comic relief. They do that with Jeffrey Tambor from Hellboy 1 and Hellboy 2. But I also think Hellboy 2 embraces the humor a little bit more. But no, Jeffrey Tambor is great. And again, just every time there's a chance to do something visually striking or interesting creatures, they go for it. Like when they bring the guy back to life and he has like the zombie on his back leading the way, and you know, these Russian caverns. Visually, it's all very striking, and I like it.
It's great. It's great. Should we go on to Hellboy 2?
Hellboy 2, let's talk about it. Hellboy 2 is Del Toro, like going full Del Toro. Oh wait, I need to talk about. I need to do the thing. Give me 1 second. Okay, Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, directed by Jon Favreau.
Oh my god!
Believe it or not, he's the good guy. An evil elf breaks an ancient pact between humans and creatures and is on a mission to release the Golden Army, a deadly group of fighting machines that can destroy the human race. As hell on earth is ready to erupt, Hellboy and his crew set out to defeat Prince and his army. And I think I remember the name, Prince Uratu? Or what was his name? Prince Nuada.
Yeah.
You know who? Oh, you might not know who this actor is. Luke Goss. He was in Blade 2. He played the head Reaper, the main Reaper vampire.
No, I don't recall.
He was in makeup, so you wouldn't. Well, he's in makeup, covered in makeup in both films.
Yeah.
The head vampire. He's in a hoodie the whole time. Okay, never mind. How'd you like Hellboy 2: The Golden Army?
This one is like with Guardians 2. In fact, it may be I know that we're talking about Guardians a lot, but like this is interesting. One aspect I think you should know about Peter and I is in terms of how we work, right? Peter is very much the kind of person where, like, in a series of films, like a franchise of films, that he tends to stick with the original over the sequels first. Like, you know, Godfather over Godfather Part 2, Star Wars over Empire Strikes Back. And I don't usually stick to that. I usually seem to fall in love more with one of the sequels, whether it be a Empire Strikes Back, a Winter Soldier, a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But speaking of Guardians, I perhaps maybe most or more than the other Guardians loving people on this panel, including Peter and Kyle, have a difficult time with saying which one I prefer, because Guardians 2 is better. And if you ask me today, it's that one. If you ask me tomorrow, well, it may be the first one. But they're so special and they're so close, I think, in terms of how they like with Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 also as well. Like, I think technically speaking, Spider-Man 2 is the better movie, but I also love the first one as well. And so I'm kind of in this place where I can't really, you know, it's kind of apples and oranges at this point. Hellboy 2 is better. It's as great as the first one was and more. Does it kick the first one's ass? I don't want to put it that way, because I love the first movie, really, and I love them both. So it's like, I think it's one of those situations where I know that I'm looking at a better made movie and a more authentic movie to Del Toro, which, you know, pushes it up a couple of levels, and takes the characters forward and everything. Ron Perlman just continued to impress me in this film, and also Doug Jones. And there's more Doug Jones, obviously, with Abe Sapien here. I'll tell you this. Perhaps my favorite sequence in any Del Toro movie ever would, and I think you might know the one.
I know exactly, because I love this one too.
And honestly, maybe one of my favorite ever. And it's one of those moments where I was just like catching myself and like, wow, I love this, and this works, and this is great. But both of them just drunk and singing Barry Manilow's "Can't Smile Without You" has to be just one of the more improbable, perfect moments you'll ever see. And I think that scene alone makes the movie. And I've been listening to that song on my playlist now because and when I listen to that song, I think of that moment. It is sublime. I'll say it. That's a great word to use for that moment. And the film is great too. So there's that.
I think that was just a review of that scene.
Well, we're going to review the movie right now, but that scene, I think, is a perfect example of why the movie is great.
No, I love that scene. And it encompasses just everything I love about this world and these movies. And again, it's these two. It's a demon and a fish guy, and they're brothers. They're brothers, and it's about like the love for each other and the love, just this very human thing of he's in love with someone but he can't be with them, and his whole thing is like, man, I wish Dad was here, he would know what to tell us.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like ribbing him, and he's like, oh, can't smile without you, like, yep, I'm gonna need a beer. And they're just drinking and singing together, and it's, I don't know, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
In a word.
Yeah.
It's funny, it's human, and it's all encompassed in
what I would kill to be in the theater
characters.
Watching that scene. That must have been so much fun.
No, I really, to me, because you say I usually don't like sequels more
than the original.
That is true. I think there's only a handful of where I would go
the other way.
Yeah. And it's mainly because it's like you said it. It's like this thing is the reason I even love it. So it's hard to like love anything more than that. Even if they're, in my eyes, basically even.
Basically.
As far as quality is concerned. I think this is one of the few times though that I do like the sequel better. There's just so much more to the characters, and then just so much more to the world. The way it starts off, where they're with the tooth fairies, and they're having to fight their way through that bullshit. Like I really enjoyed the relationships between the characters. Again, you see so much. Abe really comes into his own as his own character. The relationship between Liz and Hellboy is great, and even Liz and Abe, as they talk, because they are friends. So their little group dynamic is great. They add a new character that I really like.
Yeah, I love that character. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, you don't always get a great reaction when you add in new characters, and I feel like in anything ever, when you're introducing more characters into an established group dynamic, you run the risk of, oh boy, ruining, because there are a lot of examples in history, in media, where there's an infamous character by the name of Scrappy Doo in the Scooby-Doo canon that, because Scrappy Doo has kind of become its own meme, kind of, or its own example of like when you don't add.
Well, it came to fruition in the live-action Scooby-Doo movie.
We gotta talk about that movie one of these days. That one's much fun, but keep that in mind. But yeah, that is very much true, and I'm also why Gunn, I think, wrote it that way. With Scrappy and everything. So, but no, do you know the character's name? He's a gaseous creature that is encapsulated in this
Johan?
Johan,
yeah,
and voiced by Seth MacFarlane.
Yes, which is interesting.
His character's,
I think he's great.
Until what?
I think he does a good job.
Oh yeah.
Seth MacFarlane.
He does great voice work. He's multi-talented in that area. Great addition. And I mean, every moment he's on screen, I'm like, man, I love this character. It's so much fun.
What I think these films do well, and I've talked about a lot in regards to like Star Wars, where I feel the world building works because they don't feel the need to explain everything to you. There's little hints and little references to things.
Just to be clear for those listening, you mean early Star Wars, right? Not.
Oh yeah, the original films. Because in the original,
go listen to our Mandalorian review on Red Spotlight.
Oh God, or don't. You don't have to. Just enjoy the show. In the original film, when their father's sort of, I forgot what the guy's name is, but he's basically the audience insert into this world in the first film, and he's explaining like what happened and he's who they are, basically this underground government division that deals with the supernatural. And he mentions like, the occult wars ended in 1958 with the death of Adolf Hitler. And he's like, don't you mean, 1945? Or that was when he died, right?
Yeah.
And then he just kind of smiles and is like, sure, So it kind of insinuates this whole history where, this occult wars between Hitler that no one ever knew about, and he wasn't brought to his death until that time. But they don't go, explaining it or anything like that. It's just a nice little nugget that drops. And it's the same with Johan. One of the pivotal decisions that he has in the film is to go and try and help Hellboy, because Hellboy is fatally wounded. And he talks about, like, throughout the film, he kind of has this, like, bag that he's holding. That there's obviously something in it. And he talks about, like, I once loved someone, and, that love is the reason why I'm in the predicament that I am now, basically a gas. And he says, maybe I'll tell it to you one day, but, now's not the time, let's go save him. And I like that. It's this little thing of, like, this is an interesting character. He's fun. There's sort of hints to this larger magical world and more to the characters, but it's not over explained.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it works well that way, and I really like it.
Yeah, one moment with him that made my jaw drop, because I was kind of like, wait, did they just when Hellboy basically breaks his suit and the gas is let out, and you're wondering, like, wait, did he just kill him? And it let you wonder for a little bit there.
What's so funny is Hellboy's reaction, because at first he's like, oh no, wait, because his anger led him to, like, break the suit. And then after, like, this sort of smoke disappears, he just kind of, like, leans back and is like, damn. It just keeps drinking his like that. And then, of course, he, like, starts hitting him and shit. But no, that was so funny to me. And yeah, of course, visually, they fucking go for it. the courtyard of the elves.
Wow.
With the leaves, the leaves falling. Well, the way the elves look, and then of course, like some of the greatest, like world building creature work extravaganza ever, I think, is the troll market scene.
Oh my god. I mean, I guess like that sequence could not have been more perfect. It gave you so many glimpses, but it was just a great sequence in and of itself for all the different interactions that happened, you literally feel like you stepped into like a gateway to all of these different worlds. I imagine like what I feel like this is most I guess alike to would be the cantina sequence in Star Wars. I guess this is what, this is how people felt when they saw that cantina
They first saw that, yeah.
Because like you see all of these different aliens just sitting in a bar, and you think like all the wondrous,
your imagination explodes,
right,
yeah.
Until of course you see what they do with it, and
until every one of those creatures has a spin-off series that explained every little aspect
and then it
of
ruins
their lives
it completely.
Yeah. But here it's so fantastic. You just see these weird. There's so many creatures that walk by and you're like, what the fuck is that? What's that? There's these weird plant things that were moving that was like grabbed up and ate a couple of fairies. They were flying around. I saw this behind the scenes where they're just walking through the troll market, and like it's all real. It's real. Like they built it in some studio lot. And like, of course, they have these really cool forced perspectives. Like in the far back, you see a bench, and then Guillermo walks over and picks it up, and it's a tiny bench. They have those neat tricks, but then it's really detailed, and you can tell Guillermo really thinks about it, because he's like, you see those nests, that's where the fairies go, and then right here's the meat market, and this is where these creatures they'll come in and sell their stuff, and da 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 da. They have so it's really neat, and you see some of the creatures. You had a fish looking squid that was cutting up fish. You had a fight with Hellboy and what was his name, Mr. Binky?
Yeah,
Mr. Winky.
One of those.
But again, it's like this massive. Just, I assume it was a suit, and they're having these huge action scenes and this wonderful. I don't know. It's just so magical to me.
Yeah.
When people talk about the magic of cinema.
No, that's an example of it.
I love it.
That very much is an example of it. And I feel like that is also unfortunately indicative of what we've lost with blockbuster filmmaking today. And again, I think I mentioned this repeatedly in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 commentary that I did with David. But while I love Marvel movies, what I don't love is their over-reliance on sound stages and blue screen and not enough physical sets. And this is an example of, in that sequence you're mentioning here in Hellboy 2, of the differences between what is real and what is not. And for most of the situations, the sound stages work, depending on the movie, depending on how much money they actually put into the CG. But one example where, unfortunately, it didn't age all that well, and we talked about this in Guardians Volume 2, there were several scenes on Ego's planet where it looks like really bad, really noticeable green screen or blue screen, and that is unfortunate because it is such a great movie, but they couldn't... And it didn't have to be that way, too, because I know that Infinity War and Endgame had, like, tip-of-the-top CG work done, where there are these completely massive sets that are all entirely done on a computer. And they ended up working so well. And, I think, like, real sets matter. I guess that's the point I was trying to say.
You know what I think? Because I have been thinking about this. Because, yes, I agree. The sets definitely matter. The CG that you have and how you use it, that matters. But I think the ultimate culprit, and it kind of affects these other two, is time. You know, when you're pumping out like 4 blockbusters a year, and like the return on sequel, it's like, maybe it's because of the pandemic, but I felt like even with the pandemic like pushing filming back a whole bunch, like they're already filming on Spider-Man 3 or the Home 3, whatever the home is going to be, and it's like, damn, like it's already going. And if it was for the pandemic, they would have been filming much sooner, and it just feels like that turnaround for making these films is so damn quick. You never have time to just plan out, you know, go like, okay, just make the movie, everything's got to go. CG artists don't have time to really, because I think when people ask, they'll look at CG back in like the 90s and in the 2000s, and they'll say like, I saw people talking about this, like, why did the CG look so much better back then? Like pointing to Pirates of the Caribbean and so many of these, even just so many of these films. And I think the reason is they probably had more time to actually work on it. Nowadays it's like blockbuster to blockbuster to blockbuster, just turn around, go. Same again with Marvel. It's like move. It's a factory. It's a machine. You have to keep pumping out things. And I think that's what hinders a lot of modern blockbuster filmmaking. I think of a lot of these filmmakers, if they had the chance, they would do that. Even the Marvel filmmakers, like, you have not liked some of the things I have said about the Russo bros. But
maybe
a lot of the issues,
understatement of the century right there.
But a lot of the issues with the film, or a lot of Marvel films that you can attribute to CG or this or that, really comes down to the CG. Like the directors and, you know, the filmmakers probably had like no time. They're like, okay, we need to do this and this. We don't have time to build anything. We don't have time to do anything. Fuck it, just shoot it on a green screen lot. We can do everything after that. And then they give it to the CG artists, and they're like, okay, do this. You have little to no time. Like, fuck, okay, do. And then they say, okay, that's it. Whereas back then, like, blockbusters weren't being thrown out a mile a minute, at least such CG heavy ones. So you could
well, I mean,
take your
examples
time
of that I can think of immediately. I mean, we also mentioned this in the commentary as well, but like Black Panther and Thor Ragnarok had particular sequences that are very, you're seeing through the machine right there. And you and I joked half seriously when, you know, those movies are being released in real time about the fact that it seemed that all the budget went to the 2 big Avengers movies, because, you know, I can't think I don't think there were very many, if any, issues when it comes to CG in those movies. That's sort of like, and I would assume those were the priorities, right? So they obviously have first dibs, but unfortunately it seemed to have come at the consequence of other films not having as much for that kind of work. Again, you probably could fix this if you actually built a set, but yeah, like that one of that waterfall sequence in Black Panther is still really, really embarrassing.
It's bad. Mm-hmm. It's like PlayStation 3 level bad.
And on the flip side, you have somebody like Rian Johnson that had 4 years to make Last Jedi.
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing for the Star Wars films. Love them or hate them.
Except Episode 9. That one got very little to no time, and you can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was a little bit more.
And that's because they had to fire the
CG.
director in the first place, and things happened, so, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of a last minute, go around. But for at least the first 3. I would even say 4. I actually think I'm surprised Solo did well. Visually anyway, like visually they're pretty darn good. Like they, I would say, and I like the MCU much more than modern Star Wars. But visually, modern Star Wars is, I think, much better.
That's in that span of time from 2015 to 2020. We're talking about what you said, 4 Lucasfilm movies versus how many?
Yeah,
how many Marvel
4
movies came out in that time? Like twice as that.
20.
So yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like when you're pumping out films, like it's a factory. Yeah, like it's gonna feel a little bit like a factory product. I still love it, but you lose a little bit something. Like with Hellboy, like Hellboy is very much Guillermo Del Toro.
Yeah, and then we're like what, 4 years in between these movies?
Yeah. Hold on. What? Okay. But yeah, no. And he had to fight to get the first one made, and then it did well enough at the box office, but then it did really well on
home video
sales.
back when that made a difference in things. It's funny how
that used to really
again
make a
another
difference.
Side tangent, another side commentary, but it's funny how home video, physical media is a dying industry. And yet it, in many cases, was the savior for many projects. One of the more noteworthy ones was Family Guy, was saved from cancellation because of how well it did on home video.
Really?
You haven't heard yet? You haven't heard this story?
That.
Oh, this is like in 2001, 2002. It's an old one, but it's interesting. DVD sales made the difference, and Fox picking that back up. And this is before Family Guy hit its peak, not after the peak. So...
Fuck, so we could have been prevented.
Yeah. The Simpsons is still going on, so
I don't...
I mean...
Yeah. I don't like Family Guy that much. But I do like American Dad.
Interesting.
Which is funny,
yeah.
Right? What were we talking about? Oh, yeah. The home video sales. And that's why it took a little bit longer to get the green light for Hellboy 2. And then when Hellboy 2 came out, the same thing happened. It did pretty well enough, theatrically, but then it did super well on home video. And then here we are today.
Since we're already on this, I feel like a lot of what happened was, and we should be clear, and correct me if I'm mistaken in what I'm about to say, but from what I recall reading, the sequel, The Golden Army, performed, it was a modest performance. It did well. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a disaster. Perhaps you could say it was an underperformance depending on how expectations were, but the movie was a success, from what I gathered. I think Peter's checking that right now just to make sure we're being accurate about that. But as far as the conversation is concerned, and we have to remember how much the conversation and pop culture matters. I don't have to remind you of a particular TV show that seemingly was forgotten out of existence because it just wasn't in the conversation for one reason or the other. But in this instance, in 2008, we have to remind ourselves that this film was sandwiched in between the first MCU movie, Iron Man, which received so much attention, and then, of course, Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, which won an Oscar.
Yeah, it's the fucking luck of the draw. It's just some bullshit. It really is.
Yeah.
It reminds me of The Thing. Do you know what The Thing is? The movie The Thing?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, I know it. John Carpenter.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Are you there?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. It's a classic today, but when it came out, it bombed, and it got bad reviews too. And a lot of people attribute that to another Alien film very recently releasing at the same time, called E.T., and people weren't in the mood for scary, disgusting, nasty aliens. They were in the mood for cute, friendly aliens. So the thing rubbed them the wrong way. And it fucked the film, even though it's like considered one, best films made, especially horror films. That just happens sometimes, and it sucks.
One high-profile example, I think, that we discussed in 2019, back when we discussed movies coming out as a regular occurrence, but in the arena of comic book superhero movies, we were talking about how, again, a similar situation happened. It did reasonably well, but it was left out of the conversation because Shazam, that's the movie I'm talking about, came in between Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame.
Yeah. And now it's gonna... I'm afraid that what you saw with Hellboy is gonna happen with Shazam. Because it's gonna take a while, but a sequel did get greenlit. And then watch it get released in between some big-ass films, and then it gets forgotten again. Shazam 2. And Shazam is one of those films and recent films that has worked for me. Yeah.
Me too.
In the vein of,
I think, to me, the best movie out of the recent DC slate.
Yeah. Since The Dark Knight. I know that's kind of a cliche to say, but I genuinely, what else has been released since then?
Bunch of crap.
Yeah. Yeah. Just running down the creature designs, I loved the Angel of Death. Also played by, what's his name? Abe Sapien.
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, yes. And they talk about how... I think Doug Jones was talking about it. How the wings, they were real. They could have done CGI. They said, fuck that, we're doing them real. And they were heavy. Like, very heavy. Like, and they would, one time Guillermo asked, hey, how you doing, Doug, under all that? He's like, I think my back's bleeding, but I'm doing okay. And I guess because I don't know if it was 50 or 100 so pounds, and just digging into his back, they couldn't use real feathers because real feathers were too heavy. So I think what he said was they got those black garbage bags. You know what I mean?
Trash bags.
Yeah. And then I think they said that blow dried them and then painted them white, cut them into look like feathers.
Mm-hmm.
And only then was it light enough to wear long enough to be able to shoot the scene. Yeah, the Golden Army is fucking neat. The villains are neat. They're very... I 100% understand those villains, I can tell you that.
Not Malekith or the Dark Elves from the Dark World?
No, this is the one elf villain that I think works and I connect to. Abe Sapien, his romance works. Hellboy and Liz, and she's pregnant and her struggling, do I tell him? Are they enough for each other? All of that. All of it works for me. All the character interactions. Yeah. And then it ends on a hell of a cliffhanger. Although, I guess you can maybe say not a cliffhanger if you want it to be the ending. They walk off happily ever after. But I still view it as a cliffhanger.
The movie ends, I feel, in a way where this is the ending of this movie. The story of the film is complete. Mm-hmm. The characters are off on a new path, and this story, this chapter has concluded. At the same time, yes, there is material embedded into the plot, obviously, of particularly Liz, that had clearly been, shall we say, set up along the way for a clear third installment.
Yeah, I I really want just a Hellboy 3. And it sucked. I was gonna make a joke about like, you know, I'm dying, you know, trying to as a final wish get them to make Hellboy 3. But, you know, there's actually a pretty sad story. A Make-A-Wish Foundation, a young kid, for his wish or whatever, was to meet Hellboy, and Ron Perlman did that. He got up in full makeup, and there's pictures of him hanging out with the kid, full Hellboy garb, like, what's up? And that got him really motivated to be like, you know what, let's make Hellboy 3 happen. And it didn't happen. And I know Guillermo, both him tried fucking hard, but just no one wanted to finance it. And Guillermo has talked about like what a 3 would entail, because from the first and the second movie, there's this sort of thread hanging over of like, he will lead to the destruction of the earth and da-da-da-da-da and all that. And Guillermo has stated like a third film would come to head with that whole prophecy. And I guess the budget that he needed was a little too big. Yeah. So it's just, and then they went with like a remake that just bombed horribly. And I feel because the remake bombed horribly, that indicates to people that like, oh, people don't want to see a Hellboy movie. So that, to me, it's like, okay, we're never gonna get a Hellboy 3. But you know, you love what you got, not what you want. And these two films, I got them, and I love them.
And you always have them, and they're great. And you know, just to add on to what you were saying there about Del Toro, I find him to be one of the most, if not the most, honest voice in the entire industry, because he often remarks on the various projects that he has been involved in or has tried to make happen. And he speaks often about the times he's gone to make pitches to studios. And he very frankly, you know, talks about how he's been turned down repeatedly. And with Hellboy 3, I think it's something like they've been trying for literally over 10 years at this point, and no one is interested. Nobody wants to do that movie, period. And I will say,
HBO Max, come on.
Hey, that's something. That's a good idea right there. Go talk to Warner Media.
If you're going to give Zack Snyder $70 million after he fucked up your entire DCEU, you gotta give Guillermo Del Toro, Academy Award winning, best director, best screenplay, best whatever the fuck, best picture, Guillermo Del Toro. Come on now, you gotta throw him a fucking bone.
On the other side of that, though, what I do, a trait that I find quite admirable about him in the interviews that he's given about the pitches he's made is, invariantly what will happen is he pitches something wonderful, original, creative, inventive, and the people were like, okay, how about we do that but with like some more standard boring protocol crap that, you know, we're used to. And Del Toro, what I love about him is that he never for a second considers at this point in his career compromising on what he wants to do. He very easily just, you know, with a smile, thanks them for their time, and then just walks out. And I think that's happened several times, because didn't you tell me that he at one point was for like with Disney especially, he was at one point with Beauty and the Beast and then also a Pinocchio movie that he might have been rumored to or have, you know, had meetings with, and of course that was never going to happen. But I mean, he took the meetings.
He's been connected to so many projects throughout the years, and I really think the reason for that is he genuinely has a lot of ideas that he would, and films that he would love to make. But it just so happens, they hit a wall. And I think probably after Mimic, he just told himself, either I make the film I want or I just don't make it. That is it. And that's the way he's doing it. And it sucks because there's a lot of films that he could have made that I would have loved to seen. But at the same time, they maybe wouldn't have been his films. So right now he's making the films he wants. They're fantastic. His last one won Best Picture. I think it's admirable. And I think he's lucky that he has the ability to even do that, So many artists can't, and I think it's wonderful that he has that ability and he uses it, and I think the last one that really devastated him was he was gonna do From the Mountain
some
of
mountain
Madness,
movie that
I believe.
He spent like 2 or 3 years working on it. They were doing pre-production and everything.
And I remember reading that he was literally already in Antarctica scouting. Like he was up there scouting areas, and then he got the call while scouting, freezing his ass off, telling him, it's not gonna happen. It's over. Just like that. Think about it. Like this Guillermo Del Toro, he's a force in Hollywood. And then everything's lined up. Not only that, it had Tom Cruise starring in the lead role and produced by James Cameron. So, like, you would think, like, fuck, this movie for sure is getting made.
Yeah.
He spent years in pre-production, wonderful creature designs and all of that. He's getting ready to scout, he's getting ready to shoot, and then call, it's over. Not happening. Just like that. Like, that's crazy.
And fucked up.
I don't know how that doesn't make you go mad. And that happened like 2 times in a row because the stuff with The Hobbit was before that.
That's true.
Where he spent 2 years pre-production on The Hobbit.
What happened with that?
And
I would have loved to have seen his
pulled
Hobbit.
Under the rug.
That sounded wrong. I'm sorry, but I didn't.
I know a lot of. I was not thinking that way at all, but okay.
If Kyle's listening, he would have been thinking that way. So
we'll clip it. It's fine. We'll clip it. I don't know exactly what transpired, but if you look at behind the scenes shit, it just fucked the whole thing up. Because when what's his name came back to work on it, Peter Jackson, a lot of people were like, oh, the Hobbit movies suck, they're not as good. It's that thing that I was telling you about. Like, it doesn't feel as, too much CG. It's not the same. He had no pre-production, like, much at all. Like, because he wanted to come in and make his film. All the pre-production had been done for Guillermo del Toro's film, but he came in, that was all scrapped. And then I think he had asked Warner Brothers for like 1.5 years of pre-production. And he didn't get that. So you see those behind the scenes and he's just shooting at the hip. That's why so much of it is CG. Again, similar to Marvel, because it's just like, fuck, like we got to shoot something. It's so much of it was that. And the fact that the films are as good as they are, I think is a huge testament to the filmmaking capabilities of Peter Jackson. But I mean, if you think about it, that experience kind of broke Peter Jackson as well. He doesn't make big movies anymore. He's just sort of been quietly off on his own, working on documentaries. And that's just kind of what he's been doing. So both directors, I think, in this instance, got fucked because I know you guys don't love them, but I love them. The Lord of the Rings movies.
Clarification. The Alexises, myself and Miss Moreno, don't particularly care. But I do believe Mr. Francisco is a huge fan, as well as Kyle. So we're split on when it comes to that. I will say, just for clarification, I enjoy the original Lord of the Rings films for all of the great work that's in them. I just don't have any kind of passion for that world or those characters. And that's even worsened with the Hobbit movies, where I care even less about them. Just to be clear about that.
So he hates the films, but I really enjoy them. But you see, those original films, they were a huge endeavor, unlike any ever known. But they were given the time. Like, there was massive, like, years of pre-production where they got everything, together, and then they shot all the films straight through, and there was this understanding like, okay, this is a lot of material, so let's make it 3 films. But with The Hobbit, it was only supposed to be 2 films, but the studio made him stretch it to 3. So it was, it's like I said, just I think it all comes down to time. The ability to really work through the film you're making. I think that's what's really fucked up modern blockbusters. Yeah, I don't even remember what started this.
The Mountain.
Oh, it's Hellboy 2.
Yeah.
The Mountain of Madness, all the way back to Hellboy 2, and so I'm looking forward to his next film, which is supposed to be it. That's what it says when I look it up on the internet, but the internet is sometimes known to lie. His next film is a Pinocchio film. Netflix this year. We'll see. But go ahead.
That was a great segue earlier about the project you were talking about, Mountain of the Madness or whatever it was called, into the next movie, which is Pacific Rim. And this is the movie that he did after both of those projects went nowhere, as far as Del Toro's involvement is concerned. And I do believe that this was the last of the blockbusters, which was released in 2013, right? Or am I No, it is 2013 when this movie was released.
Yes.
Okay. Talk about Pacific Rim, Peter.
And like you said, Pacific Rim. It's the movie he jumped into right after that whole debacle with at the Mountains of Madness. Pacific Rim, directed by a guy. To fight monsters, we created monsters. When legions of monstrous creatures known as kaiju started rising from the sea, a war began that would take millions of lives and consume humanity's resources for years on end. To combat the giant kaiju, a special type of weapon was devised. Massive robots called Jaegers, which are controlled simultaneously by 2 pilots whose minds are locked in a neural bridge. But even the Jaegers are proving nearly defenseless in the face of the relentless kaiju. On the verge of defeat, the forces defending mankind have no choice but to turn to 2 unlikely heroes. A washed-up former pilot, Charlie Hunnam, and an untested trainee, Rinko Kikuchi, who are teamed to drive a legendary but seemingly obsolete Jaeger from the past. Together, they stand as mankind's last hope against the mounting apocalypse.
This is interesting, right?
The music to this film pumps me up.
This is interesting. This perhaps was my least anticipated movie of Del Toro's. It is a blockbuster, yes, and I've mentioned previously that, they get me going and everything as far as movies are concerned. And this is another big divide between me and Peter here. I don't care about kaiju movies. They've never really I guess the only part of kaiju movies that work on some level for me is the disaster movie element to it, which I am a fan of. But for the most part, I see really good kaiju films and I'm kind of left, okay, that was good, but I probably won't think about this ever again. Whereas Peter is a huge fan of these movies and has a long history with them and loves them to death.
Love them.
You know? So, yeah, because I think I think I've seen Peter Jackson's King Kong once or twice. Long time ago.
I loved Peter Jackson's King Kong.
I don't remember the movie at all. I'd have to go watch it again.
What?
I know.
I love it so much.
No, it's great from what I remember, and but I don't care about these monsters. They don't have. They're not characters to me or personality. I think I remember seeing Roland Emmerich's Godzilla movie, which was exactly what a Roland Emmerich movie would be, which is funny at times. I saw Godzilla King of the Monsters in 2019, and that was good. And then I forgot it. But great work on the movie. Great stuff. So, yeah, expectations were very low off the bat with this. I just don't care. That being said, of course, Kyle himself is a huge fan of these movies as well. That being said, this is easily, far and away, the best kaiju movie I've ever seen. And I'm only going to credit Del Toro because he knows how to make movies like this where it can keep my interest regardless of the big monsters that's, destroying everything. It is filled with characters. Hey, that's an engaging personas that you can root for, and funny hijinks with Charlie Day on the side and Ron Perlman. There's enough there to keep my interest. It's a lot of great effort to kind of put them front and forward. You have, I believe, Charlie Hunnam, and I don't remember the girl's name, the main young woman who is the character here. But
oh, man.
I mean, it's still. I think at the end of the day, it's still these big robots that are punching monsters. But as interesting as that can be, or can't be, in my case, I was riveted every part when they were on the screen. So, this is probably perhaps among the lower half of Del Toro films for me. That being said, it is that ain't to knock it. I actually was quite entertained and happy with the film.
You know why I think it works a little bit better for you as a kaiju film? I think the reason being is that the humans are directly involved in the action because they are in the suits. They are the ones going out and, facing the monsters. Whereas with every other kaiju film, it's like you have human characters on the side that kind of exist to have a movie. And then you have the monsters. I've watched 1.5 million kaiju films. I don't remember the human characters per se, but I remember the kaiju. And that's kind of how the films work. Yeah. This might be a little bit of a risque comparison, but human characters in kaiju films are plot to porn. They're there to just kind of have a movie, but they're not the reason why you watch it. But with this film, the human characters are directly involved in the action, and I think it makes it a lot easier to become involved. It blends that you don't usually have in kaiju films, where it blends the characters and the humans and what they're going through and the kaiju action, and it brings it together. And this is another one of those films where it ain't deep. It is what it is, but what it is fun as fuck, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It's a lot of fun, which is what it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I really love about Guillermo Del Toro. He'll make some of the, the most beautiful, heartbreaking films you'll ever see. And then he'll just make I just want to make a fucking kaiju movie. I just want, big robots with big monsters and they're punching each other and it's so much fucking fun. And then he just goes for it, right? He doesn't go well, what is the smart version of a kaiju film? He's like, no, fuck that. What makes it fun is how dumb it is. And he embraces it fully. But still commits, it's not like the Marvel thing where you laugh at everything happening around you. You still fully commit to the situation. But there's just moments where they have a big oil tanker ship, and they're using the robots are using it as a bat, Gypsy Danger, to bash the face of a monster in, and just it has a big fucking sword. It has a sword. Alexis, the giant robot has a sword to stab the monsters with, okay? It's fucking amazing. I love it. But also, again, Guillermo's really good at this. He just loves the worlds he creates. And there is some really neat world building going on. Okay, how would society change with everyone constantly being attacked by massive robots? All right, and they have these massive walls that surround the cities. They have, and one of the more fun aspects of it, bringing back Ron Perlman, he's this underground gangster, I guess, who he specializes in the black market of kaiju parts. Every time they bring down a kaiju, they'll go in and scavenge their parts, and they have these giant fleas, these giant bugs that I guess are the fleas that fall off the monster, and then the bone, you mix it together, it's an aphrodisiac or some shit. But that whole world is so cool, right? And again, you only get a glimpse of it, but the glimpse you get is just so interesting. I don't know. Did you have anything else?
We were saying about, damn, God, I had something and now it's all gone. Well, I hate when that happens. I guess I'll talk about how much I loved the man, this is embarrassing. Well, actually, okay, now I know. Real quick, Ron Perlman is never not great, and a double negative, but he's perfect. And one of the most hilarious sequences was watching him being eaten by the kaiju that supposedly was dead, and then after the credits, he ends up breaking out of it. So that was really fun to watch with him. There actually was something pretty hilarious about this, and I wanted to ask you. Did you watch this movie in a theater?
I believe I did.
Now,
yes.
You, knowing how I know you very well, detest, as well as I do, 3D. And now we have to, with Hugo and other films of this particular moment of movies, we have to also talk about how a lot of these movies in this particular time were also in conjunction being filmed in 3D for 3D experiences. I'm going to assume you didn't watch the film in 3D.
No. I didn't even see Avatar in 3D, okay? That's how committed I am to just... Actually, I did see Monster House in 3D, now that I think about it.
Why?
I don't know. It might have been that was the only one left. Sometimes you get to the movies and it's like, oh, this they filled up this seat, but there's one that starts 15 minutes later, but it's it's the 3D one, and it's like, oh, fine, fuck it, whatever.
That's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. There's actually a hilarious quote here from him during the production of this movie that I wanted to read real quick. Del Toro, let's see here at the film. Let's see here. At first, Guillermo Del Toro decided not to shoot or convert the film to 3D, as the effect would not work due to the sheer size of the film's robots and monsters, right? And he explained, here's just him, quote unquote, I didn't want to make the movie 3D because when you have things that big, the thing that happens naturally, you're looking at two buildings, let's say at 300 feet away. If you move, there is no parallax. They're so big that in 3D, you barely notice anything no matter how fast you move. To force the 3D effects for robots and monsters that are supposed to be big, you are making their perspective miniaturized, making them human scale. So that was his reasoning for not wanting to do it in 3D. But of course, I just mentioned that it ended up being released in 3D. So what happened thereafter? It was later announced that the film would be converted to 3D, with the conversion taking 40 weeks longer than most. Del Toro said, and this cracks me up, "What can I tell you? I changed my mind. I'm not running for office. I can do a Romney."
Did he say that?
That was the full quote. I'm not running for office. I can do a Romney. That's what he said.
That's funny. You know what happened. Warner Brothers came to him and they're like, we're doing this. It's for the money. And he's just like, yeah, okay. It's not a big fight.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to be clear, in case the reference went over some people's heads, this probably was an interview in 2012 when Mitt Romney was running for president. And of course, the Obama campaign successfully portrayed him as a flip-flopper, which doomed his presidential aspirations. In case you wanted to know the history, I just wanted to put that out there. But it also shows you, Del Toro's humor and why, we just love him so much. There's so many different aspects and layers to him. And we'll get more, I think, in our final installment of this. But yeah, there's so much he says that just speaks to me as a person that makes me love him so much.
Oh, you listen to him speak and he's like a fucking
like poet. One of the great philosophers of our time.
No, he really is someone I can listen to talk for
and have
hours. I listened to a lot of his interviews, and it's so entertaining, his point of views, and really what drives him and all his decision making, the way he sees things. I love it. But yeah, with this film, not much to talk about. It's great, it's fun, it's big, it's loud. The creature designs are, of course, fantastic. And speaking of, Del Toro, I've heard him speak on this film, and he, again, very detail oriented. He'll talk about giving weight to the robots, the Jaegers. And he'll have all the like machinery figured out. So he'll have, he wants, when they lift their arms, he wants to see like the movement, and you see all the nuts and bolts moving, and you can see that in the film. They'll make little movements, and you'll see the shifts underneath. And I guess he really went a long way into detailing that, and the same with the designs of the monsters. So yeah, it's those little things that really separate it and make it special.
Just like he is, and just like all of his films. And I don't know what else to say, but what better else to say to end this particular episode. I do believe, Mr. Martinez, you've exhausted all talking points at this point, so we can go ahead and get to the closing. All right.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Peter, for being here. It was really, really good show. Really interesting back and forth, and a lot of wonderful... I always appreciate all the different side discussions that we can have, in this world, in this medium of film, based on the particular work that we're covering. And I hope you all listening found it to be the case as well. And of course, we have one final installment here for the Del Toro series. Next time, we'll be talking about the films Mimic, Crimson Peak, and The Shape of Water to conclude this series. As a reminder, of course, that Mr. Francisco and I are going to be doing weekly recaps for WandaVision that is currently streaming on Disney+. Ms. Moreno and I are doing weekly recaps for The Crown, which just recently, by the way, was definitively proven by data provided to us by Nielsen, was more popular than The Mandalorian, which, by the way, we also just reviewed on the season 2 anyway. We just reviewed here on Red Spotlight. We have a lot of wonderful stuff coming to you in this month and the next. And if I am, in fact, correct, Mr. Martinez, one aspect of note for this recording, especially when it's released, this may be one of the first Red Spotlight podcasts released in the new Joe Biden administration, where Donald Trump is no longer the president.
Well, come on now. Trump might still have something up his sleeve. He'd never give away the presidency to the deep state. He's playing 5D chess.
This has been Red Spotlight Entertainment.
Q would never lie.
Thank you all for listening. Stay under the spotlight. Bye-bye.